question is, who is best equipped as the next president to make good decisions about how we use our military, how we make sure that we are prepared and ready for the next conflict, then I think we can take a look at our judgment.
Welcome back to Inside Iraq. We are talking to Michael Gordon, the military correspondent of the New York Times and the co-author of the best-selling Cobra 2. Michael, we saw just two eclipses by McCain and Obama. Obama was asking who is best equipped to handle Iraq. What's your take on that?
Well, I don't have a position on the American election, but I do think that the key question for Americans is not whether right or wrong decisions were made in 2003.
What John McCain asked, what do we leave behind?
What do we know now? And not merely how fast do we take out our forces, but how do we have a political influence in Iraq to make sure that it stays on at least a representative course or a democratic course, does not become autocratic, and stays stable.
Is that political influence tied to the military presence in Iraq?
Well, I think it is, because under either Senator Obama or Senator McCain's approach, they would use, at least Senator Obama is proposing to use the residual American presence as a source of influence. For example, he said that he told me that if Maliki acted in an undemocratic way and refused to incorporate the Sons of Iraq in the Iraqi security forces.
But he hasn't so far, only he took it about something like 10,000?
Well, the Iraqi government, there's talk about them taking 20% of the Sons of Iraq. The Americans would rather it be 30%. But regardless, Senator Obama told me that if for some reason Maliki refused to take these steps, the United States might stop supplying logistical and other training and other sorts of military support to the Iraqi forces to help them, get the equipment they need, get the training they need to be professional. So Senator Obama, even within his construct of removing forces from Iraq, sees the residual American training function as a way to leverage the Iraqi government. Senator McCain, interestingly, does not. He accepts really the argument of the surge that if you provide security for the population, eventually, over time, the politics and the political reconciliation will begin to happen.
Let us look at the situation from al-Maliki's position point of view, as well as a Dawah and Siri. Why would they be worried about the position of the United States? Once you draw out of the 140,000 current troops to about 20, you diminish your ability to influence, and Iraq is flush with petrodollars. To what extent al-Maliki or even any successive prime minister would be worried about the U.S.?
Well, I think there's a lot of political posturing going on in Iraq. It's not all happening in the United States. And in the context...
Is he being populist?
Well, certainly the prime minister is playing a populist nationalist card, and the Sadrists are against this agreement, and he's trying to show that he's going to get rid of the occupiers within a rather compressed time period, 2009, the summer of 2009 to move out of the cities, the end of 2009 to remove all forces. But I think there's an understanding, certainly among Iraqi military types that I've talked to and others, that the Iraqi forces will continue to need American training and other forms of support beyond then, and I think logically there'll probably be a need for an American combat presence of some sort beyond 2011. And if you read the fine print of this agreement, it says that the end of 2011 is a date goal, and that there's to be a review by Iraqi officials prior to the end of 2011 to assess the progress towards that goal. So in the fine print of this agreement, implicitly, they're leaving the door open to asking the Americans to stay longer, which might indeed be necessary.
That draft agreement has not been released. The president invited a select group of congressmen just to look at it in the White House. No copies have been available to anybody. That golden clause you just referred to, that caveat, in a way it gives the United States the ability, at least theoretically, to stay as long as it wants.
At the request of the Iraqi government. And what I'm suggesting...
So if you find a willing Iraqi government, a willing Iraqi prime minister, then the U.S. is going to be there forever.
I think that's putting it into conspiratorial a term. I think the Iraqi government is staked out a pretty nationalist position, calling for the departure of American forces by the end of 2011, that is probably not in the interests of Iraq and their own military.
Why is that?
Because the Iraqi military is unlikely to be ready within such a short time frame to secure the entire country on its own.
What timeline are we looking about, for instance, for the Iraqi army, at minimum, to go back to prior 2003 status?
I don't know, but General Dubik, who trained the Iraqi forces, he was asked these questions, and he gave a period of 2009 to 2012. Really what you need to do is be guided by events on the ground. I mean, here's some questions. Will the Prime Minister integrate the sons of Iraq into the security forces and help provide employment for the others, or will he try to arrest them?
Let's stop at this moment.
Will Sadr continue his ceasefire or stir up trouble? Will Iran stir up more trouble, or will they try to keep it to rather a low level? We don't know what's going to happen. Therefore, you have to be prepared to adjust to the circumstances on the ground.
Let us take this reluctance by al-Maliki to integrate the 100,000 sons of Iraq, the awakening councils. What lies behind it? Is he worried that there might be a second militia within the Iraqi army? I mean, if it was good enough for the Badr Corps, why is it not good enough for the awakening councils?
Well, as you know, the awakening councils are largely Sunni, and they do include, and I've met them in Diyala province and Arab Jabor and other areas, they do include people who were drawn from the ranks of the former insurgents. And so I suppose, I'm not a representative of the Maliki government, but I suppose he's got some anxiety over bringing these people into Iraqi forces, and he may be wondering how much he can personally control them, because Maliki seems to be taking a lot of steps to build up his own authority within Iraq. I think that's probably a large part of it.
But he's also liable to committing a grave mistake if, for instance, since October 1st, that file has been transferred to the Iraqi government. The payment of $300 a month for each fighter is going to come from the Iraqi government. Is there a possibility or fear that they might revert to the insurgency or even join the hardcore Iraqi resistance that so far they have not tied their fortune with the Americans?
Well, clearly there's a fear of such. I mean, this is a significant concern of the American military, that this was an effort that began prior to the surge, but really spread throughout Iraq because of the surge, because there weren't sufficient American forces in Diyala and elsewhere for these awakening movements to align themselves with until the surge. So the surge helped foster this, and it really did help bring security to many parts of Iraq. So you don't want to see this sort of disintegrate, and it's very important that this effort be married up with the Iraqi government so that you have stability outside of Baghdad and even indeed in Baghdad.
So next year is going to be vital on many fronts, whether the status of forces or the awakening councils. How much credence do you put in what General Ray Odierno said, that Iranian agents are trying to bribe Iraqi members of parliament to ratify the agreement?
Well, I don't know. I have no access to the intelligence that General Odierno was referring to, but it's no secret that Iran is opposed to this agreement, and Iran's agenda is for the Americans to leave Iraq so that Iran can exert its own influence in Iraq.
Michael, if this election was held last year in 2007 at the height of the sectarian killing, Iraq would have been the dominant story and perhaps at the uppermost of American voters when they cast their vote. Right now it has been knocked off the American radar, but has it seeped into the psyche of the American people? Has Iraq and the US forever tied together because of what happened since 2003?
No. This upcoming year is very critical. This 2008 was the year of elections in America. 2009 is the year of elections in Iraq, the provincial elections, the national elections. And as we've discussed, there are a whole bunch of other things that have to happen. And so this will be an important year of decision for the Iraqis, and also for further defining what the nature of the American-Iraqi relationship is. And I believe that it would be in the interest of Iraq for the Americans to have a presence in Iraq, to help not merely the Iraqi forces, but help them with technical assistance in other areas, if the Iraqis themselves want it. And I believe many of the Iraqis do want it, and they will want some continued American support in that country. And one of the ironies is that the surge really was successful as a military operation. And as a consequence, Iraq became more stable. And as a result of that, Iraq faded from the media, although it's still covered extensively by the New York Times. And so partly because the surge was successful, and partly because of the rise of economic issues in the United States, Iraq has faded a bit. But it will be an absolutely critical issue for the next American president.
exactly what is it the Americans they want from the Iraqis, and what is it the Iraqis they want from Americans, not in the past, but in the future?
Well, you know, I think are you speaking about the American public or the American politicians?
American government and American public.
Well, they're not always the same. But I think Americans, if you asked about what the American public wants, the American public does not want to occupy Iraq. The American public does not want to keep large numbers of American troops in Iraq any more than it is necessary. But I think given the sacrifices that the United States has made to basically help the Iraqis build a new society out of the ashes of a dictatorial and brutal regime, 4,000 American dead, more than 20,000 wounded, I think the Americans would like to see something good come out of all of this. They would like to see a stable country that has some form of representative government, some basic respect for human rights.
What about the Iraqis?
What do the Iraqis want? I think a lot of Iraqis are exhausted by all of these years of war. And yes, there are militias and there's Al-Qaeda and there are elements like that may stir things up again. But I think a lot of Iraqis just want a chance to live a peaceful life. They just want some basic security, and they also want their basic needs to be met. I think that's what they want. And I think if you talk, you know, where they stand on the American presence depends on if you're an oppressed minority and you're a Christian, you want to see the Americans stay because they protect you. If you're a Sunni, you may want to see the Americans stay a little longer because you're afraid of the Shia militias. If you're a Sadrist, you want to see the Americans go. But I think there are a lot of Iraqis who will tell you, we want to see the Americans go, but not just yet.
The military correspondent of the New York Times, Michael Gordon, and the co-author of Cobra 2, thank you for being a guest on Inside Iraq.
Thank you.
To access the show and to send us your comments, please go to aljazeera.net/English. That's all the time we have for this week. Join me next week when we take another look inside Iraq. Until then, goodbye.